because I can't remember everything, and my writing's not that quick or that fast. So, but it's great that you're here with me to talk and, just have a discussion. I didn't prepare anything, but
That's good.
okay, cool. But I do have an idea of what I wanted to talk about. And because I've been researching a little bit about the Black pioneers, the trailblazers in San Diego. And I discovered that there were people that, have written about different individuals, but I feel like it's not detailed enough. And I feel like there's more information that needs to come out. And I also feel that some of it's not even accurate, you know. And so that's part of it. And then, I think you knew a long time ago, I had said, oh, I'm going to interview Black San Diego. And I think that was over 20 years ago. And I interviewed like maybe 11 people. And then I kind of got discouraged and put it down. So I'm picking it back up again. And
Good.
so I felt like I needed to talk to you, and because I know you've been here for most of your life, and I thought you could help me a little bit. So
More than happy to.
that's great. So I'm gonna turn up the volume because I can't hear you. Um, so, oh yeah, tell me your name first of all.
Cecil Steppe, Steppe.
Okay, thank you. Um, okay, the first person I wanted to actually talk about is Rebecca Kraft, your auntie.
Yes.
And can you tell me a little bit about her and the things that you remember? Because I believe you were a young boy when she passed away, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I was well, younger. It depends on what young is. I was old enough to know.
Okay.
Let me get just a little easier for you. Let me just give you a quick snapshot of me in this city.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And then you can piece it together any way you want.
Okay.
I was born in Versailles, Kentucky. My mother and my Rebecca and brother Thomas Wilson were all from Versailles, Kentucky. I came to San Diego at year one. My father and mother divorced. My mother did something really acknowledging now in a new environment. I didn't know until I was 12 the original spelling of my name is Steppe.
Mm.
Then my pride began to overflow when my mother added the E. And I consider that the first shot of women's liberation. I don't
Mm.
know why they were divorced, but I do know that she made a statement that I have honored ever since. So the E is her ability of moving away from whatever it was that she left from into a new beginning with my uncle and aunt. We all lived together at 2871 and a half Imperial Avenue. My two brothers and I, along with my mother, joined my Aunt Rebecca and her husband, John Kraft, and her brother, Thomas Wilson, all living at that address. It was a wonderful opportunity for me as the youngest in the family to begin to understand what our culture, what our family relationships and everything about us was about. So I had the opportunity, my Aunt Rebecca, who in my mind is partly responsible for a lot of what I focus on now, but it was an environment that I walked into that I was not aware impact it was going to have me later in my. On Sundays, the Women's Civic League on Imperial Avenue, and all us young people community, which included Earl Gillum, who lived across the street from us, we would go to the meetings, and as kids, we would sometimes have to lead the pledge or lead the Negro national anthem. And it was a nice way of introducing us without telling us we're being introduced to something. And so every Sunday we would go and we wonder, what in the heaven am I doing here? What a waste of time this was. But it's now life reflecting backwards. That was the beginning of my birth, my ingredient to talk about working in the community in our behalf. The Women's Civic League was made up of about 10 Black women. And that's why today I always make sure people understand, men, you think you're all that in a bag of chips, but our success, our movement forward, when you look at us, not just San Diego, but historically, we've been pressed to leadership by women. And so I praise women rather than putting them in a position where they are thought as a second to a man. It's not the truth. You are the strong ones, always have been. And I think men need to understand that and embrace it. So, anyway, that's my
Wow.
beginning.
That's great. Oh my goodness. Wow. So now I don't even know what to say. Well, you know what? I think on a personal level, when it comes to your auntie, did she like I was like, well, what things did she like? I mean, I know she was busy um supporting activities that she, in regards to civil rights and whatnot, being the leader at the NAACP and helping the first person to become a Black teacher in San Diego and whatnot. But I kind of want to know, like, did she cook? Did she like to cook? Did she what kind of things did she like to do? Do you
Well,
know?
she did enjoy cooking. She
Hmm.
came out of a Southern Kentucky heritage that when we would have dinner on Sunday, we were required to wear a shirt and tie to the dinner table. On
Hmm.
Saturday, we cleaned the living and dining room because we never entered the dining room unless we had company. And the nice thing about my Aunt Rebecca, she had the living room as a place for a lot of the politicians. And so I would be seated there listening to all of this, again, asking myself, what in the name of heaven am I doing here? But at dinner time, we would always have plates, napkins, cloth napkins.
Hmm.
We always started our meal with a prayer. We had to obey all of the critical protocols, napkin in your lap,
Hmm.
wipe in your mouth, never talking out of turn. As a young man, you didn't speak unless you were spoken to. The elders did all the time, and it was always my uncle, her husband, my mother, and the three boys. We were always at the table, and it was the kind of thing where we learned so much. My aunt Rebecca and my mother were school teachers in Versailles, in the Black schools. When they came to San Diego, well, first my Aunt Rebecca went from Versailles to Chicago, where she got her master's degree, and then came to San Diego. And then mother and my brothers and I, we joined them later on. But at the same time, she felt it was really disturbing to her that they wouldn't hire her as a teacher in San Diego. And that was the beginning of her taking on issues of not just Black teachers, but also police officers.
Hmm.
It was a for her with what her instincts shared with her that she had to take it on as an issue. And it was the kind of thing that I was witnessing, but not aware of what I was witnessing. What a wonderful opportunity. You see, I think too often adults talk without realizing they teach more about what they do rather than what they say.
Mm. Okay. Wow. So, let me think. Yeah, I was
Well,
gonna ask. Yes.
Well,
No,
let me
go.
give you this.
Okay.
The two individuals, Aunt Rebecca and Dennis Allen, were the
Mm,
two individuals in our community that really pushed the education as well as the job opportunities in San Diego. And those two, they were not always together, but they had individual organizations, and that was what they kept pushing for,
mhm.
breaking the employment opportunities in San Diego.
Okay. So you went to San Diego High School, and I'm the historian over there with the archives and whatnot and trying to clean it up. But I had always wondered when were the first African Americans that went to San Diego High, and I noticed that there was one or two like in the early 20s. Do you know any of the history of your school, of San Diego High when you were attending or yeah.
No, no, I don't know much about it because we were always attending San Diego High School.
Mm-hmm.
We, from our community, we started with Stockton Elementary or Logan Elementary,
Mm-hmm.
then on to Memorial Junior High School, where the first Black teacher was brought in and became a teacher at Memorial. And it was from Memorial to San Diego High School. And that was the route for most of us in Logan Heights.
Okay. Okay. So did you have any racism going on at the school? Do you know?
Well, if we did, I don't think we noticed it.
Uh-huh.
What, what we did notice, it was really kind of an intriguing thing. A lot of the Portuguese kids, they were the ones that during the summertime would go fishing. And they were the ones with most money at the school.
Oh.
And they always come back from fishing, and they were the ones driving the cars, the new cars, and money everywhere. Really was the more affluent were the Portuguese kids.
Mm,
Uh, it was intriguing, and it was a good mixture. I don't think we had anything that stood between us and the other races
right, right.
that we were aware of. I'm sure that there was some that it didn't make any difference because all of us ethnic minorities, we came from Logan Heights
Mm-hmm.
and we went to San Diego High School as the only high school in our immediate area.
Okay. Another question. Did you go to school with Mr. Hatcher with Poochie? Were you in the
Poochie,
same class with him?
no, Poochie was at a class lower than mine.
Oh,
I
okay.
graduated San Diego High School in 1951.
Okay. All right. So what did you do while you were in school? Were you active?
Well, I did a lot of football,
Uh-huh.
basketball, track. That seems to be what most of us between that and then later when the boys club started, where we began to do a lot more with football and basketball and with our coach there, a Hispanic student out at State College, Augie Escamilla became for us and for me as the alternative to being without a father. Augie
Mhm.
became our father experience in so many of us. It was a
Interesting.
it was a one opportunity because without a father, the Black men in the community kind of embraced us who were fatherless. Mr. Anderson had a cleaners, and he
Mhm.
invited me in and put me to work. His wife taught me how to put hems on my or, cuffs on my pants. I learned how to press clothes. Mr. Miner had a shoe shop down on Imperial Avenue, and he brought me in and taught me how to put rubber heels on shoes. And all of us were part of Bethel Baptist Church, which was the major church in our area.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it was the kind of thing where between the church and the Black men, those of us without fathers, we were kind of adopted in so many ways. And I include Augie Escamilla as one of those. He was not that much older than us, but he became
Oh,
the adopted as well.
okay. And I notice, just knowing you, that you have a very strong Christian background. How has that helped you in your life?
Oh, geez, I don't know how I would have made it without it. See,
Mm.
one of the things that I discovered, and it comes out of my religious thinking, as like so many of us even now, we're surrounded by angels. We just don't know them.
Mm.
I've had so many good examples where angels have come out of nowhere and have done things, said things, and helped me in so many ways. I'll give you an example. After I came back, I left San Diego for the first time when I was 18 and I joined the Air Force. And I
Mm.
joined the Air Force. The Korean War was going full blast. And I convinced 6 of my buddies, instead of waiting for them to draft me, since I couldn't swim, so I wasn't going to go in the Navy, I couldn't drink the ocean. I didn't want to lay down in the mud, so I wasn't going into the Army. And I decided, well, let's join the Air Force. And so 6 of us joined the Air Force, all of us out of San Diego High School. And part of the issue for us in our community, if you started with the National Guard, you got a certain amount of payment for each time you did drilling. So
Mm.
we had a lot of our young men in high school with us. They were part of the first contingent that went to Korea and all got killed in the Korean War at the
Oh.
very beginning. And so I think all of that was in the background in some of our minds. I'm going to make my choice. And I think that was also something that the other 5 also participated in that fashion. So we all went to the service. When
Mm.
I left the Air Force, 1956, I decided to go back to school. I had started when junior college first started. It was on the campus of San Diego High School. I was
Mm.
playing football. I made about $35 about every week because I was assigned the duty of keeping high school students out of the parking lot. Well, I had injured myself for the 9,000th time with a dislocated shoulder. They took my $35 away. Korea coming. That's when I convinced everybody, let's just get on a Dodge since they're going to get us anyway. Let's go
Mm.
where we want. But coming, I decided that I needed to get an education. And so I returned to the junior college, got my AA degree, married, and had my children. Decided not to go to state college. I wanted a smaller environment, so I went to Cal Western, which was a Methodist related schooling. And it was while I was there, the Urban League, San Diego had a bus company that was a family owned. The Hall family owned the transit company, trolleys, and the buses. And so Percy Steele, who was the president of the Urban League downtown, called me one day and said, would you be interested in working as a bus driver? The company was going to hire their first black bus drivers. And I said, yeah, man, anytime I could make more than $100 in a day, it was like I had died and going to heaven.
Mm.
So I went down, I was interviewed, and they must have seen something they liked in me, but they had already hired 3 black men as bus drivers. And that was what I felt was their emotional quota. But they offered me a job in the mechanical department and asked me if I'd be interested. Yes.
Mm.
So while I was going to college, I worked full time at the bus company for 8 years to get my degree from Cal Western. But it was the opportunity for me because this is where the angels began to surround me. I didn't have much money. I would be working at 4 o'clock at Date Street. I had worked my way up from a person doing the bus cleaning to begin taking on some mechanical duties. It was a wonderful opportunity. But I also was in a position at Cal Western where some days I did not have enough money to even buy a cup of coffee. And I would go between class being out and having to be at Day Street at 4 o'clock. I'd go in the lounge and I would study because I was not the brightest light in the community educationally. I was always be in a position, and I remember Mrs. Brown, who worked in the cafeteria there.
Mhm.
She came to me one day while I was sitting there studying and had a sandwich, piece of pie, and a cup of coffee. And I thanked her. I said, "But I don't have any money." She said, "Just sit down and eat." That was one of my angels.
Mhm.
And I found myself in a position where I'm working at the bus company and I'm working hard. And I was trying every time I had a chance to study a little bit between breaks. There was a white woman bus driver, Mrs. Reed. And I used to hear a lot of nonsense with some of the drivers. "Hey, schoolboy, how you spell cat?" That kind of nonsense.
Mhm.
And kind of cute little bangle stuff. And Mrs. Reed came by one day and she had heard these comments. She hugged me and she said, "Cecil, don't worry about these fools. You're going to own them one day."
Mm.
Another angel walked in. Between that and my wife, and now with 5 children, I graduated from Cal Western. My youngest daughter, Annette, was 3 years old and walked with me to get my diploma at the graduation. And it was really one of the most delightful opportunities. And that began really my move forward in the community. That's a long story, but I wanted to give you where I came from and why, with the respect from my Aunt Rebecca and my mother and my members in my community and the church. That is what was the impetus behind me not giving up and keep going. And I've cherished that and decided that that's what I want to be to anybody that I have a chance to be, because we all need someone, an angel on our coattail.
Mhm.
That's another long speech. I just get carried.
Oh. Wow. You gonna make me cry. You know why? Because you've been an angel too, and I appreciate you, you
Thank
know.
you.
And I think I've told you that before, just thank you for, being there for my mom and dad, you know.
Yeah.
I would see you, I would like, oh wow, Mr. Bass, and I don't
Yes.
know who else showed up, but you guys were awesome. It really showed me how community and brotherhood and friendship could really come together, and I just appreciate you and always
Thank you.
will. Just thought
Thank
I'd
you.
share that with you. I'm so sensitive. Oh my God. Oh, wow. How did your mother make it being a single mom? And did she ever get married again?
No, my mother got never did get married again. I think part of the generation that she came from
Hmm.
with children, that was the highest priority. One of the things that I remember, and it sometimes it even bothers me now. She had a date. Mom was a good-looking woman,
Okay.
and I think that there were a lot of men that really would be very interested in her, but she had her focus on the three of us. That was everything that was, she felt very strongly that was her duty and responsibility, even denying herself. And so one day she had a date and she was all dressed up and looking good. And as a very foolish young boy, I said, "Mama, you look like those women at the saloons on the movies." She broke into tears,
Oh.
went in and changed her clothes and didn't go. And I have really had that in the back of my mind for ages. I didn't know what I was doing, but it was overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate with her. Though, it's just I know, because when it's your priority is your children, I mean, considering, I have 4 children, been a single mom most of the time, and you know just thinking that I could have a relationship, with, raising the kids. It's really difficult because you don't know how you can fit somebody into your life, because they have to fit into your whole life
Yeah.
because of your children. And my kids, they rarely liked anybody. So they were going my kids would give them hell. Yes. So it was just safer and better just to just stay single.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Understood.
yeah, now a couple of my grown children are like, "Mom, when you gonna start dating? We're grown now." And I'm like, "Well, there's nobody out there right now." Okay. I'm happy. I'm happy being by myself right now. So I'm good. So let me see. So your mom and Rebecca they are the ones that really influenced you, and you had um, a lot of different angels along the way that guided you. And you know, um, you worked for the social services. What's the name of the organization? Um,
Well, in the county,
yeah. What made you what made you decide to work there in that field?
two things happened. First, I started in the probation department. I,
Hmm.
s- I started as a junior probation officer, which was the only route in, but it was the opportunity to get my foot in the door. One of my counselors at Cal Western had been a probation officer in another state. I did a internship with the probation department and decided this is where I belong.
Mm,
It was an opportunity for me. I wasn't thinking in racial terms, I was thinking human terms.
mm,
I found myself in a position where I had a lot of the older people would ask me my opinion on a lot of things. And I found that whatever it was about me that seemed to be attractive to people who had questions or issues and wanted some conversation about it. And so probation seemed like the spot for me. So I
mhm,
started as a junior and worked my way through every department in the probation department, served as the assistant superintendent at juvenile hall. When the honor camps came in and became part of probation, they asked me as a person who wanted to try to heal the honor camp, which was a separate department with probation. There was a lot of anguish. And so the chief probation officer asked me if I would go over to the honor camp side and serve as the hearing officer. The hearing officer had the responsibility. Any rule violation from an inmate had to be adjudicated by the hearing officer. So I had an opportunity of rotating through all six camps, and it gave me another golden opportunity for whatever reason to draw a relationship closer between probation and the honor camps. At some point, I later became the person representing the honor camps in the administration of the probation department. And
mhm,
so that was full circle. And after 12 years as the chief probation officer, I had decided I was going to retire. And so one of the things that occurred, there was welfare fraud occurring in the social services department. And the CAO at that point, David asked me if I would go over while they were doing a financial or research for a placement for Jake Jacobson, who was leaving. And so, of course, I said, well, let me check with my wife.
mhm,
And I say that very candidly because my wife knew that everything I did, it was 100% of me. And it meant that whatever I was going to do, there was going to be some shortages on the family side because my goal was always to do the best performance I could ever be. And I would never take an assignment that without her approving it. And so we had a long talk and we decided. But when I got there, I discovered welfare. Welfare in the 30s was well meaning, but one of the most destructive things that ever occurred for families. It drove fathers out of the house. And so what I sat there as I'm looking at all of this, 35 district offices, and I called David Jansen and said, David, this is just a bunch of crap. I don't like what I know now. I don't think welfare reform is really what it needs to be. And I'd be willing to stay here if you wanted me to. And so he took it to the Board of Supervisors. They approved. I became the Director of Social Services for 6 years, all based on what I saw, the ugliness that was happening, particularly with ethnic minority fathers being driven out of households and families being torn for absolutely no reason other than a silent racist kind of response.
Mhm.
So 6 years there. I retired from the county after 35 years with the county and decided now it's my time to do my stuff. But
Okay.
it didn't last long. I was working over at our church digging some ditches when I got a contact from Jim McWilson, who was with the Urban League.
Mm.
And so he asked me, he said, no, he didn't ask me, he told me, we need you, man. I said, man, I don't need a job. I don't want a job. I'm having myself a good time. And so eventually, after he showed me the financial situation the Urban League was in, I couldn't say no. So I
Yeah.
did 6 years as the president of the Urban League. And then I retired.
Yeah, and the Urban League was doing really well with your leadership, and I don't know what's happened to it now. I mean, I don't, you know, we don't have to talk about it, but I'm just like really surprised, that it's not the way it should be, you know.
I understand.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, um, Ho so are there any, individuals that you think may be important for me to know about, as it pertains to Black history in San Diego?
Yeah, I think you need to know about uh, Mr. Allen.
Okay. All right.
And I think you need to look at some of the history of Reverend Charles Hampton.
Okay, and was he the one at Bethel Baptist?
Yes,
Okay.
he was the one that bought me my first pair of long pants.
Oh,
And when we went from Hensley marching over to Bethel Baptist Church, he had me by the hand and we marched the entire congregation all the way up 28th Street to Clay. And he was a very significant piece of my life as well.
oh, that's wonderful. Wow.
The other thing that, and it may not be too late to recognize it, but Fannie and Bill Payne, Dr. Payne, and I think that he was one of the first Black men teachers.
Mm,
Check his history out, and what you'll see, he graduated from what was the Bonn in Paris. He was one of the professors that moved to Pacific Beach Elementary School,
okay.
and the community upset and angry because you had a Black man in the classroom. It's a history that I think you will really enjoy, and
Mhm.
how the community and how the superintendent of schools at that point said he was not moved, Dr. Payne.
Mm,
His wife taught at Memorial. She had also been a student at Memorial earlier on. So she was a Black teacher at Memorial Junior High. And if you could capture some of that, I think that would be some very good, interesting history for
okay.
you to be able to hook onto.
Okay. All right. And how are you doing with your ancestry research? Have you been working on it or
What
anything?
my sons have decided that they wanted to capture our history, my history in this community. And
Mhm.
so between Brandon and his father, Russell, and the other brother, Ryan, they asked me if I would do a drive through the community where they could tape everything.
Yes.
And they
Do
did
it.
that. They have done that. They're
Oh,
still working on it.
okay, good, good.
And so
That's very valuable.
I took them to 28th and Imperial.
Mhm.
I took them to everything going across. I shared with them, and from 25th and Imperial, when I got out of the service, one of the things during the Korean conflict, and I was in security service with high cryptography rating, I would keep my mind having to work sometimes around the clock on the computer, not on the computer, on the teletype machine, because we
Mm.
had direct connections from the thief headquarters in Tokyo to the US, as well as to Texas, our headquarters. And so sometimes I would be on duty for 12 to 15 hours while some emergency was going on. And so one of the things that was extremely important when I got back from there, and what the kids did on video, I shared with them my walk when I got out of the cab, when I got out of the service with my duffel bag. I walked from 25th Street because one of the things that kept saying during the Korean stuff was I could visualize the golden streets. I knew everybody's family up and down all the way up to my house. And so I had in my mind, like relations in theory do, I had golden streets in my mind. And so I had decided before I got home, I was going to walk from 25th Street and just relive all that wonderfulness. And I cried all the way up. And the reason I cried, because it did not match my dream.
Mm.
It was not a golden street. It had begun to run down. I walked by what used to be the Victory Theater. We had our own theater. During the war on 25th Street, we had, and Aunt Rebecca was part of the one responsible and maintained that with the other women. For the military people, we had our USO. Across the street from Bethel Baptist, we had a housing, a possibility for young Black women. And so it was the kind of thing. Now I'm walking up 25th Street and I'm remembering who lived here, who lived there. And as I'm walking, I'm crying because all of the luster that I had in my imagination was just not there. It was a
Mhm.
deteriorating community. And I think dreams that you face that keep you balanced in some ways, when you open your eyes one day and you see the reality, your dream is shattered. And so by the time I got to 2871 and a half Imperial Avenue, I was worn out. And this, my kids captured all of that conversation as we were coming up Imperial. Across the street on the corner, the Cloud family, the liquor store there. Up on 30th Street, we had our own pharmacist. We
Mm.
had the 25th, 28th Street had our grocery store, Monty's Market. All of these things were very clear. And I tell you, it was not only was it a letdown, it was also a revitalization of what was and why it could not become again.
Mm. That's pretty deep. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I have a somebody gave me what is his name? John Miller. You know John Miller,
Yes, I do.
right? He gave me a couple of the directories. One's the Negro directory, and I from the 1930s, and
Yes.
then one from the 40s that I've gone through, and it's like it's it's like it's not there anymore. Like what you were saying, it was there for a moment and then it just disappeared.
Hmm.
And and it's just like, well, where did the dreams go? You know.
Yeah. the dreamers are gone, and the dream is now being revitalized with a new focus and a new name.
Mm.
It starts in my mind, and what I value in you was the day that you began walking through the cemetery
Mm.
and you saw Aunt Rebecca, and you sent me that information, and I with you right behind her was her husband John and her brother Thomas. And I thought, that's where the dream is being revitalized. And I think you're part of the dream making.
Mm.
And it's so important because, one of the things, if you forget or didn't know what was before you, you can make the same mistakes not knowing they're mistakes.
Mhm.
Thing can be done in the same way it was done because there are different environmental factors, there are different attitudes, different personalities. But if we're all focused on one driving principle, and that is betterment of our race, I remember very clearly in this community when there was no freeway and Federal Boulevard was the route to El Centro,
Mm.
or National Avenue was the route to Tijuana, and how, as a Black youngster, when we were going through El Cajon, they wound up the windows.
Mhm.
When you were going through National City, you wound up the windows. You didn't want to get caught in La Jolla after dark. All of those things, those are the pieces of my history that keep me focused, but not to the point of wanting to be destructive with what I have. Not being in a position where I want to not claim it, but understand it and do something about it. And I don't feel like I got to scream, yell, and howl or be the Mau Mau to the catcher. It's
Mhm.
just really about what I can do as an individual is what has been one of my driving principles my entire history as an adult. And I think that when I look at some of the things that I've been able to be associated with and some of the things that have come my way, um, I feel blessed that I could live to the image that my mother and my Aunt Rebecca, Uncle Thomas, and Uncle Wilson all provided for me in an environment that I knew I was loved, but I didn't quite always understand why I was loved.
Mm.
But now I look at it and say, without those supports, it could have been another way for me.
Right, right. That's true. Well, I appreciate our talk, you know. Um, and and I always think of your wife all the time because she always just would reach out to me. She was so kind, so sweet, and she'll never be forgotten. And unfortunately, I never heard her sing, but looking at her history of being a singer is wonderful. But
Outstanding, outstanding. She had a voice that would make tears drip.
mm, yeah.
And then she was, in fact, one of the things that through high school,
Hmm.
she was the soloist for the songsters. And every time there was an opportunity for the choir to go somewhere, it was always given her an opportunity for a solo. And
Mm.
she had the kind of ultra soprano voice that it was a gift, no question.
Wow.
But her mother was a singer as well.
Oh, okay.
Only her mother was a singer with the jazz
The what?
jazz clubs,
Oh, okay.
as Evelyn sang in the jazz clubs downtown.
Okay. Wow.
And oh yeah, she crossed a lot of bridges. Brigham, Brigham's
Okay.
band. Yeah, that's another person you are to the Brigham family.
Oh, the Brighams. Hmm.
Mhm.
Okay. I don't know why I've heard of that name or I came across it. So, Thank
He was
you.
a trumpet player.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you
The
so
other
much.
person that I think would give you a lot of good history to talk about, George Walker Smith.
Oh, yeah. Well, he passed away though.
Yeah, but
So
his daughter, his
his
have a
daughter?
lot. Yes,
Oh, okay.
she was the caretaker for George,
Okay.
and I think that if you had
Carolyn. Carolyn.
Carolyn,
Carolyn.
yeah, and I think Carolyn would have a lot to tell you.
Okay.
The
All right.
Catfish Club and the whole thing, along with her mother and her father.
Hmm.
I think that they had a lot to do, George, with the Board of Education.
Hmm.
And I think that he was one of those people in the community. Every community has one or two Black individuals that the white community always reveres. They're the ones that sneak in the middle of the night to get information.
Okay.
Well, George was one of the information givers.
Hmm. Hmm.
And just knowing the story of when he came to town and why he took on the Presbyterian,
Okay.
I think that would be a wonderful addition to your historical perspective. You'd love that.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you. All
You're
right.
welcome.
All right.
Well,
And
I hope I've been helpful to you.
oh, you
Enough of it.
have. You have, and it's so good to see you. And I love you, and I just, like I said, I have good feelings about you, 100%. So,
Thank you.
and I
Thank you.
did speak to your grandson Brandon. He came to the Zoom. He was online with our Rotary Club, Southeast San Diego. So he's
Yes.
excellent. I know you're proud of him. He's doing a wonderful work,
Yes.
great person. So
Yes, he is. Very proud.
yes. All right, my dear. So thank you again. And if you ever want to talk to me, just give me a call. So
I have your number. I have a
yes.
Zoom number. I'll you.
Okay, my dear. Thank you.
Take care
Bye-bye.
of yourself.
You
Be
too.
safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.